Hey, welcome to Taboos Chronicles. Tonight we're going to talk about the topic of children mental health. I have two guests that's going to be talking with me. They have a dynamic program that deals with children and mental health, and we're going to just kick around the ball. But I am Roberta, the Tool Lady. My co-host won't be with me tonight, Jackie, but I'm here, and we're going to get into this. So I want to go ahead and let my guests introduce themselves. Go ahead, guess.
Okay, hi, I'm Keith Ruffner. I wrote the children's book. Beth and I worked on it together. And the book is about our three bunnies that help each other work through some big emotions and feelings. And the way that got started was Beth already had this company, New Groove, and she was helping to coach adults. And when I came in, I loved the concept and everything, but I felt strongly that I wanted to help children, and that kind of goes back to my background of some early childhood trauma that I'd had. So I wanted to help the children, and I couldn't really figure out how until I started writing these short stories about the bunnies for Beth. And then it turned into, well, I think we could turn this into a book and a program to really help children understand their emotions and feelings and learn how to talk about it in healthy ways.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm Beth Wooler. Hi, nice to meet you guys. Thanks for joining tonight and for inviting us tonight. We basically, like Keith said, I started with a adult-focused program where I do coaching one-on-one as well as presentations. I've spoken in Costa Rica at a international happiness conference, as well as we both spoke internationally during COVID via Zoom like this or a webinar where we actually talked about the topic of belonging. And so a lot of what we've constructed is because we both struggled with mental health concerns when we were young, very young. And we'd like to give parents and adults, as well as the children, tools that we wish we would have had when we were young. So that's kind of how it came together.
Okay. All right. And to be frank, what really interested me in it was that you did talk about that in when you were sending me all that information, that it did talk about trauma and it tied it to the emotions and the need of emotions. And then I understood that you all also identified some trauma, and that's what led that fire to develop this. And then now I noticed, I'm thinking the children start at what age?
It's roughly from 4 to 8. But
Okay.
there's shoulders on either end, depending on if the child is more mature or maybe at the other end needs a little bit more help. So it kind of depends on the child, exactly what their personality is like.
Okay. Now,
some of what we heard about the age for the children is that even older children, when they are going through a trauma and are having some struggles expressing their big emotions and feelings, that they may begin to revert to a younger age. And so even though some of the children are older that the counselors and teachers are working with, that the book is appropriate for them, because when they're in the midst of a crisis like that, they revert to a younger age.
Okay. And I understand that I used to work with mental health as well. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more, but we're going to do a check-in ourselves. So we're going to do a feeling check-in ourselves. So either one of you can tell us how you feel tonight.
I would say I have a mixture of feelings of excitement and joy. And also there's some bad news in my family that we've received. So I'm also sad. So I'm all of those things kind of at the same time. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry to hear that.
Thanks.
Yes, it's pretty tough times right now. And how about you, Keith?
I'd say mostly it's anxiety.
Okay.
I do have some anxiety and some depression, but anytime there's a setting like this, particularly at the very beginning of it, I get a lot of anxiety, and it makes me feel pretty warm. Sometimes we'll be giving a presentation or a talk or something. Beth will look over and it's like, "Oh man, you're hot." I'm like, "I'm so hot." Sweating. And so sometimes it just takes a little bit to get over that, but that's definitely something that happens a lot is some anxiety.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'm pretty. I would say interested. So I have a kind of an intrigueness that I want to continue talking about this subject. That's why I was kind of backing us up just a little bit before we get into the subject. Now, the thing is, this is Taboo Chronicles, and so we all have some things that are taboo when it comes to dealing with us. Um, what are some taboo things? And you said childhood trauma. So what I'm hearing is possibly some things happen that you didn't get to address or work out.
Mhm.
Now, so what are some things that went along with that was taboo when you talk about your feelings and emotions as a
In my
child?
in my family, the thing that's still taboo, even though it's been 40 years almost, is my mom had a mental health diagnosis when I was 12. And my family didn't want to talk about it at all. But I'm the youngest of 7, and everybody else was at least out of the house or could drive. And so I was the one that was stuck kind of with her symptoms more. And so a lot of my siblings still to this day just disagree with my experience. Like it wasn't that bad or it didn't happen that way. And it's just different perspectives. They're out of the house, they have a marriage, they have children, etc. But so just not being able to listen back and forth that or even hear what I experience is painful probably for them to hear, so it's all been swept under the rug for a long time, and I'm the one that brings it up if it ever comes up.
Wow. Yeah. So some feelings of not being heard.
Very much.
Definitely feelings of not being heard. And I don't know about you, but some taboo with us is with our culture is you're gonna be, especially as a girl child, you're gonna be heard and seen and not heard.
Yeah.
So meaning you don't have a voice, you don't talk, and you definitely don't go and tell any trauma. Going back to what Keith said, you don't go and mention it's a trauma. You don't do
Right.
that. That's certainly a taboo topic for us. What goes on in our houses, stay in our houses. So it does. It kind of bottles up, kind of into the anxiety that you're talking about. Keith, what would you say?
I think what makes it taboo, maybe for a lot of us, is for young boys, young girls, adult males, females, is that it's not talked about. And so for me, what I experienced at a young age was just a lot of bullying. Some from my brother, some from other kids, but there was never a safe space to go to get away from the bullying, because as a boy, you're told, well, just tough it out, or if you're getting picked on, you need to fight back. And I think because that's probably just in a lot of people's culture for boys, is you got to be tough. We see that a lot now being talked about. It's important to be tough. And so because that's what's important, is for those of us that were empathetic and highly sensitive people, not being able to get the help, not even understanding how to ask for it, and looking to adults to understand that you need it, but then telling you, you just need to tough it out, or you're going to have to fight back, or don't be a baby. All of those kind of things makes it become taboo as you get older. I can't even ask for help. I can't even tell somebody who loves me, I'm hurting and I need some help for whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true. It really is true that, and I think that is a hard one for men, male children, because they're not, if you show any emotion, then they instantly say, oh, that's to weakness, or you're being weak. And like you said, even being bullied and traumatized is being bullied. If you're like me, you just like, I don't even want to fight, just be I don't even want to fight. And so you're like, no, you don't understand. I don't really want to do that. I don't want to fight. I don't feel a need to fight. And so that is traumatizing, and I can relate to both of your examples, because we live in a society where mental health is not identified, or it's not okay to be not okay, and it is okay not to be okay, and it's okay to talk about what's going on in your emotions and your feelings, and it's healthy to do that. But we are told not to, and not to cry, not to let anybody see you cry. And it could be like something horrific, like a death, and you're like, no, I want to cry. Just let me go ahead and cry. So I can see that. Now back to what Keith was saying earlier, he was kind of getting into the concept or the idea that with trauma, the brain is like for lack of a word, I say a concussion. And so what happens is, where that child is at 5 and that trauma happens, guess what? Like Keith was saying, is that developmentally you're still that 5-year-old.
Especially when emotional things come up, right?
Yes. And when you have to react. So you may still react like that 5-year-old that was traumatized. And so it's very hard to get out that cycle. And I work with children every day, and even some, to be honest, when I looked at the name of your company, I was even thinking about some of the children that I have with autism and their behaviors that they have as well, because their behaviors, once we can address some of how them feeling safe, like Keith said, because we all want to feel safe. We don't want to feel like we're scared all the time. That's not fun. So once we can identify that and neutralize the environment and make them feel safe, we have better outcomes from them.
That's right.
I think people can understand that you revert back to your child self, or whatever period that you learned a behavior to protect yourself from whatever was occurring. And for me, it's showed up a lot throughout my adult life with my work and with my relationships. Anytime that I felt like I was being bullied or held down or attacked, I would immediately fight back as hard as I could, because that's all I had ever learned to protect myself was nobody's going to help me. It doesn't matter if I say, I don't want this. I don't want to fight. I don't want to do any of this. I don't want to have to yell. But that's all I knew to protect myself. And until I really got into therapy, I never really saw that or understood that's what was causing my behaviors as an adult. Was I would fall back on the behaviors that I learned as a child to protect myself. So even at 45, before I really started getting any help, if I got pushed or thought I was being trapped or held down, I would fight back.
Right. And generally that's what happens, people, and some people say, oh, they're behaving like this, like a child. Well, guess what? That is that traumatized child that is behaving that way, that's inside of that person. It's actually when they're having a tantrum, like Keith just said, even if they're 45, 95, 85, if they've never addressed that tantrum, I mean that trauma, and never addressed it and never tried any of the tools, as Beth had said, then there we have it. You're going right back into that circle again, and you may fight people that you really love.
Mm-hmm.
And you may not really meant it, but you just felt like you were up against the wall.
I was going to say earlier, you referenced a concussion, and I don't know how much brain science everybody here is super interested in, so I'll keep it really light.
Yeah.
But there is something that happens when that trauma happens and you have that rush of emotion and it gets trapped in your brain very deep. And so the comparison that's kind of easy to think about is if you're a skier, which I'm not, but I hear about it, and you can think about a skier going down a hill, and when they follow somebody else's tracks, or when those grooves are deeper, they go faster. And so some skiers hunt those tracks out, but that's what your brain's doing. So as soon as something happens when you're a little bit older past the event, it taps right back into how deep that groove is in your neural pathway that traps it in there. And so in order to counterbalance that, you have to do a lot of work that basically packs on a little bit of snow to cover up that groove and make a new one that's a healthier path. So you can kind of do it at the same time, but that's really one of the ways your brain works. And it's there to protect you, right? I mean, if you were traumatically hurt, it wants to do whatever it can to avoid that again. So,
yeah. And so, and I like talking about that part of it, because individuals really don't understand it. Trauma only came upon the scene probably, I'll say 10, 15 years, where people were actually, oh, I was traumatized. And some people didn't identify it, right? Like you said, I had a mom that was mentally ill, may not have been treated because of the stigma. And, family really couldn't support her because they had some stigma, some biases. So basically they probably like, just let her go and stay over there and she's going to be okay. We're going to check in, but not thinking how traumatic that is for a child to be with that mom and to watch those cycles, and then not have an outlet to even talk about it, or not to even be able to talk about it, just to kind of hold it like a secret, So people, so now it's good to talk about, okay, trauma it's like a sore, but we just can't see it. So basically, and it's in the brain. So basically, things happen and it's just like a scab on your arm. It gets tore off and it might get a little salty and that hurts, right? Or that alcohol, it hurts. And then you feel the same emotions all over again. The only thing different, it does not heal as quick as one on the other parts of the body. So yeah, I really appreciate you bringing that up, because people don't know that.
Exactly what you're saying is, we read a lot by a Buddhist monk. His name was Thich Nhat Hanh, and he talks about that of suffering. And whenever you had a past trauma event or a past hurt, even when it heals over, when you touch that same spot again, it hurts worse than it did the first time. And every time it gets touched again, it's going to hurt worse. And so you become more and more reactive instead of being able to be responsive, because you haven't truly healed that spot.
And because it basically triggers in your brain, it's straight to your feeling zone, which is called the amygdala, and it shuts down your ability to actually think and reason. It bypasses that, just like as if we were cavemen and we were being attacked by a saber-toothed tiger or something. What happens in your brain is that your thinking part of your brain is kind of muted and not even allowed to play until the feeling part of your brain has felt that feeling. And of course, we want to avoid that feeling, which makes us continue to feel the feeling, right?
Right.
So it just takes a lot of effort. I think, like you were saying about how a physical scar might heal, or scab might heal into a scar. These take different kind of work that people aren't aware of sometimes, to really address what's going on. And like Keith said, how it comes out in your life when you don't even recognize that they're actually attached to each other.
Completely, completely. Um, just for our audience, I would like to for us to talk about some things that could be considered traumatic for a child, because I don't think people really understand, because we're coming from just such a taboo society that if children don't pay bills, they shouldn't even complain, right? They have lights, gas, and water. Why are they complaining? People say that, and you're like, oh.
Oh,
And so let's talk about some things that are taboo, if you don't mind, or some things that are traumatic to us that are to children.
I think overall, before you start to look at like specific things that might be traumatizing for a child, I think it's important to remember back that what they're going through at this point in their life, whether they're elementary school, kindergarten, middle school, high school, is that the things that they're dealing with, that is the most important thing to them at the moment. As an adult, the most important thing at the moment might be, how am I going to feed my children or clothe them or take care of them? That is the most important thing as an adult. But because a child doesn't have those same responsibilities as an adult, the most important thing at their life might be at the moment is, why do my clothes look different? Why can't I fit in? Why don't I have the same things? Maybe I don't have the new phone as somebody else. And as a parent, I did that. I was like, it's good enough. What you've got is good enough. It doesn't matter what anybody else has. But when you think about, that's the most important thing in their life at the moment, that's traumatizing for a child to be different or other.
Wow.
And if you watch that throughout society, that's a big thing adults do, and they're doing it even more and more right now, is they are creating other. And so for a child, it is traumatizing to be the other.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. It definitely is. And I mean, you even went a little bit deeper than even what I was thinking, on to just fitting in as far as culturally. And that's correct. And I'm going to be honest, here this recently, I was like, I kind of been traumatized all my life and did not realize it, whether it be from shutting down, because that's one of my responses that I would give when I want to be safe. I shut down. I withdraw. That's my other safety mechanism, And if, of course, if I got to, I'm going to fight. That's my third one. But I was like, wow, because you want to be included, and then you certainly, like you said, you don't really understand why you're not included. What happened? What is the problem with me that I cannot be included? So you're 100% correct.
I think for children, children are wonderful, and they're naturally empathetic, and they are naturally inclusive until we teach it out of them. Children are modeling their parents, from the very start. That's who they know. They're gonna model that parent. You see it in the animal world. The babies are modeling the behaviors of the mother for the most part. Not always, but for the most part. But so the children are modeling the behaviors of their parents. They're understanding what it is to be a little human being by watching their parents. And then as they get a little bit older, they're going to model the behavior of their peers.
Yeah.
And so as they look to belonging, they're trying to belong. And children, before they learn some of that, of let's close in our group, let's create others that we can't be. Children are so inclusive naturally, but we teach it away from them, and they're learning it from adults and older children. That's why they're learning to create the other, and you lose belonging when there's others. Then there's somebody you don't belong with.
Yeah. And I think the thing is, what I'm hearing you say is that the influence of other people are the ones that detour what is naturally innate in us. And that means to care for each other, to love each other. And by the way, I am an empath as well. So during certain times, I get challenged. Like right now, coming in this new year, because I am an impact, it's been really challenging for me emotionally.
Yes.
Even though it doesn't have, some things don't have anything to do with me, but it certainly does hurt me as if it does. It's really overwhelming sometimes. So I can relate with that empath part of a human, because it's hard to not care if you're already a caring individual inside somehow. It just, and I would like not to, but it's the truth. I don't have anything, I can't do anything about it.
I think one of the things I always like to remind people of is empathy and empath and empathetic. All of those are words a lot of people are tossing around, maybe accurately in some cases. But
Mhm.
what I think is really important to remember is empathy is feeling that feeling, or knowing that you believe you feel how that other person feels. Sometimes you don't confirm it with them. Like, you can describe what you believe they're feeling, but really it's better to ask them what they are feeling. And then better than that is, rather than just understanding how they're feeling, can you be compassionate? So compassion is empathy plus an action. And
Yeah.
so what are you doing, not to just, oh, I feel for them, but I want to actually help alleviate some of their suffering, right? And
Yeah.
so even if it's like me putting my arm around Keith, or when I'm sad or in a mood or something, it took us a while for Keith to learn. All I really want is for him to sit next to me and just hold me and touch gently and tenderly, and know that I have someone there. Even if I'm talking a lot and I'm spilling what's hurting to me, he does not have to solve it. That is not his job. His job is simply to listen in that moment, and that is an action.
Yeah.
Listening is an action, as long as you're not constantly interrupting, or trying to get them to stop talking because you're the one that's uncomfortable. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And I agree, some people don't want to hear it. But when I say empath, I mean, like, I remember the story about Jesus. What is
Mhm.
that? What show was that called? The Passion.
Oh yeah.
I broke down watching it. Uh, uh, South Central. I was watching an old show about it. I just cannot handle. I really cannot handle some things as far as when other people are suffering. And so I don't have to ask them. I just know for a fact they are
Yeah.
suffering. So it's really, really, really real. So, but and then if you do have people that can give you compassion, I like the action part. I know there's a first aid for mental health. I don't know if you
Yeah.
got.
Mental health first aid. Uh-huh.
Hmm. And that's what basically it's teaching, that laymen are able just to assess, and not necessarily assess, but do an action, like go ahead and ask a person, "Are you okay?" And then help them figure out what they can do, because we want to be more aware when a person's not in a good place, and how to help them navigate and support them. Because sometimes, like you said, all they want to is here. Sometimes it's, you didn't have a voice. Some people never had a voice. I'll say it that way. And right. And so they just want somebody to hear them say something, and that person to hear it without even trying to figure it out, like you said, or not trying to solve it, or not even really giving a response. But I understand you.
It's just providing comfort to somebody and letting them know that you care just by
Yeah.
being there.
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
curious, when you were a child, you may have experienced what I did. Like when I was in elementary school, I would come home and tell my mom that I got in trouble at school. The teacher was yelling at me. I didn't want to go back. So my mom would call up to the school and ask the teacher, and it was always the same. The teacher would say, "I never yelled at him. He's never done anything." But the child next to him, I was yelling at that child. But because I was so empathetic and was so sensitive to that, I took that on, and that's how I finally realized I'm very empathetic, because just like you were saying, like right now, it is hard to like drive anywhere because people are so angry, and and emotions are contagious. And so, but for those of us that are empaths and highly sensitive, those things are really, really contagious. And it's hard to protect ourselves sometimes.
And find your boundaries and hold your boundaries, and even know that you can put boundaries there, you know?
Correctly. And that's correct. So basically, I was always the underdog person, because I always felt bad for the underdog. Always. Another thing, I never like navigate inside of a group. I always navigate on the outside of a group. So some things are too intense for me, like even basketball games, football games. You know, if I go, I would go and sit at the bottom so I can get out pretty quickly. Or if it gets too loud for me, or it's too much for me, I don't. And as an adult, of course, I don't even do it. You know, I don't even have to try, because I'm not in high school no more, so I don't have to try. It's not a big deal though, but it was always a challenge, to be honest with you. And I really didn't go to school for a long time. I tell people the story, but it's the truth. I went to school full time probably in the third grade, because I was really sick a lot. So.
Well, I definitely understand that feeling of being trapped in a space where I can't get out of. Like the first time Beth wanted to have a birthday party for me, I was like, well, I don't know, maybe. Luckily, I got sick, I think, before it happened, so I got to avoid it. But that came up a lot. That came up a lot in therapy. I was like, I can't be someplace like that because I feel trapped. And my therapist kept saying, you can leave. You are not physically being held there. And I'm like, but everybody will get upset, and nobody will. I had all these excuses why I couldn't do what I needed for me. And she said, that's remember, that's not true. You're not being held down. You can leave anytime you want.
And and you got to learn your voice, right? What position you want to play in it. Like, okay, Beth, I really want to spend time with you, and maybe we pick like maybe 4 other people, and because that's my comfort zone. And maybe we pick a restaurant or somewhere that's not a lot of maybe, medium people, because it's too much. It's really too much for me. And for you just be able to navigate that, because that's what I have to do. I navigate like exactly what I want to participate in. I have a daughter. She's the social butterfly. So is my sons. And so they like concerts. They like games. They like the professional games. And they're just always rolling to either one. And Mom, you want a ticket? And I'm like, not at all. So, not at all. I'm not going. So you have to. And then if the thing about it, going back to your answer, it is hard for a parent to parent that individual. Why? Because sometimes it seems like you're not wanting to be like everybody else. Or sometimes it seems like you're kind of being defiant or withdrawn. When really that's your personality.
So I wanted to share, and since you brought up the birthday, before the big trauma that started for me at age 12, I had a surprise birthday party when I was 7. I hated it. I was terrified. I cried. They lied to me to get me to go to the store because we needed something, but I knew they lied as soon as we came home, and that hurt more than any positive bit of that party. So Keith knows I still don't like surprises because of that. And I don't know if that came from something even earlier, but I sure don't like to be lied to. I think a lot of us don't, right?
Surprises either.
Yeah. So, but I will say Keith successfully had his first birthday party as an adult with me.
Yeah.
Last summer. And we did have about 6 friends and your son.
It was small.
It was
It was
here.
So it was pretty controlled.
Yes.
Right.
People that
I knew.
You selected them.
Yeah. I picked those over.
And it's okay.
So kind of tie that back in to our Making Friends with Feelings program. We knew pretty quickly after we had written the children's book that this was going to be multi-generational, because we could teach the children this, but if their parents didn't understand it, they weren't going to be able to reinforce it with their children. And one of the lessons we have is watching for these nonverbal cues. So if we can just teach people that maybe this child who's sitting there by themselves and is taking on something that's happening with the child next to them, that is a highly sensitive child. That child is going to need something extra. And they have needs that they might not be.
They can't talk to you about them.
They're going to have some unmet needs. They don't have the vocabulary to say, you know what? I'm super empathetic and I'm taking on the feelings of other people. A little kid doesn't know how it works.
Right. Or and because you really don't realize it. I mean, it took me all my life. I just know that certain things, like I said, certain movies, certain things that go on in society, even knowing certain things about people just really cuts me to the core. And so even those things, just identifying, wow, this is really taking me down. And by the way, I'm a therapist by trade, so that so that makes it even tougher. But I had to identify that, like, wow, you take it on more, it seems as though, than everybody else. And when I first started in the mental health field, I actually only did it for 2 years, and then I quit and went to sell Lincolns. True story, because it was just too much for me. And then so I sold Lincoln's for like a year, and then I went back to the mental health field.
I could see that it would be really hard for a therapist who was very empathetic not to take on a lot of the things that you're hearing. And so learning, like for me, the one thing is like I can create a chi ball and I can, protect myself with that light energy if I need to. But really, it's just sort of this motion reminding me, okay, it's going to be okay. I can protect myself from some of this other stuff that's around. But, we have to learn those things.
Right, we do. And we got to learn it's okay to have feelings.
Yes.
Because like, again, usually they say, well, the taboo part is you shouldn't have no problems. You don't pay no bills.
Yeah.
Why are you upset? I pay the bills. I should be the one worried here. And so we get that in our homes. And so it's children like, okay, but I am kind of worried about this. I am stressed out about this. I do have a friend who possibly, they said that will never come back because she died. And I'm trying to figure out where'd she go, So you do keep all of that in because you have these stigmas or these in the environment of adults who don't understand. As a child, you do need to be you need to have the understanding of what's going on, and you should be able to illustrate what you feel and not necessarily, like that said, have someone say, well, no, you shouldn't feel like that.
Right. And that's validation, right? You need to feel validated by somebody you love and trust.
Right.
And that's just so important, I think, to self-esteem in the long run, right? So we're talking about some really, unfortunately, pretty basic things that often get overlooked just by saying it. So not even just listening, but validating the other person's feelings and saying, you might not understand them yourself, but I understand you feel them. And it's very important to allow that other person to feel those feelings. And I think that would have changed so much of my life if somebody listened and then validated me, because I do feel like Keith might be the first one who's ever done that. Okay. So yeah, we have a little love story behind this. We've only known each other 6 years, so we experienced a lot of this before meeting each other.
So that makes it good though, because you can understand the default, or you can understand, okay, if I see her doing this, possibly, from some things that have happened in the past, and I can see her because we do I used to tell people, you never do anything. People never do any, especially behavior. Behavior is never something new. They always, we always have a tend to continue that same behavior. It might be a different situation, but we continue that same behavior. So it's like, so you always watch people, behavior always means something. And then you got to know it's a pattern to it. So that probably helps because also he's aware of his pattern. So he also can be aware of yours as well. Now, I did see the animals, and they're all rabbits, you said?
Yeah.
Yes, they are. So we have this book in English and Spanish,
Mhm.
and it's Making Friends with Feelings, but it's about our three bunnies. This is Molly, this is Buddy, and this is Shiner. And so Keith took them as inspiration to have them interacting in like an everyday setting that three children might be interacting. And so it follows them through a regular day of regular feelings, and they all vary, right? Like one of them's confused, one of them's angry, or sad, but he acted in an angry way, which is a lot of times what we all do. And so, and the other one is a little scared because she's coming in from foster care. So each of the bunnies already has their own challenge. And then you kind of put them together and how that interaction is. I really like to think of it as it's not just a book about emotions, it's also a book about connection and being a friend to others and being a friend to yourself too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think ultimately you have to be a friend to yourself first. You just do it. Can't work out the other way because it'll get lopsided, right? It'll get ran down if you're the friend and that other person's not the friend. So you really have to be a friend to yourself to realize, kind of what I'm looking for in a friend. A pretty good friend.
How old do you think you were when you realized that?
Um, hmm. I really don't know that. I really couldn't. I really couldn't remember that because I spent a lot of time in the hospital. I was that kind of like the bubble baby. They used to because I had severe respiratory problems, so I used to be in that. It was zipped up in the clear bag that zipped up. That used to be me a lot. So I always had my own imagination, and I was pretty much, you know, I can remember a couple of people coming by my house during school just to check on me here and there, maybe two or three girls that did go to school with me, but they would kind of keep up with me because my attendance was really pitiful. There was no law then against attendance.
Yeah.
There was
I was just saying that because I don't think I realized you have to be a friend to yourself until I was in my late 30s. Like, and I think a lot of people who are in relationships that aren't healthy for them don't know that yet still, you know?
Yeah.
Do you know how old you were?
I think I still work on it some. I don't know exactly what all that might be from, but I think I tend to give a lot in a friendship, and then all of a sudden I'll be like, well, I'm not getting anything back. I don't want to be friends with him anymore. There's not much in between of I should start, asking for whatever I need back as well, instead of just giving everything from me. I need to be able to verbalize, hey, I need a little bit back from you. That's one of the things in the book is we were very specific when we wrote the book. We didn't use the words that, like Molly didn't want to make friends with the other bunnies. She wanted to be friends.
Right.
And so to me, that's a big difference of being friends instead of just, I just want to make friends and do whatever I have to do to fit in. Right.
Right.
Relationships.
Yeah. And because, the part about the relationship part is also, if you look at the foundation, or, different foundations, then it is hard because you usually, they say, show me your friend, then I'll show you who you are, right? That's an African pride. So what it's saying, in negative or positive, you're going to attract whatever you are. So if you're kind of a manipulator, you kind of going to go along with some manipulators. And you're going to kind of get a bad deal to yourself, because guess what? It's going to kind of go off the train track a little bit, because you're both kind of going off. You know, you're not in it, like you said, because Molly said, I'm going to be a friend. So that's a difference. That is a big difference, because Molly has an idea of how she's going to be a friend, and possibly what she wants in that community of friendship. Yeah. So
And she does get their help in the end. She asks for it, and the other two bunnies help her build a ramp so she can come up and play with them at the top of the castle. So it does have a very sweet ending, even though there's like a little bit of tumult in the middle about the other two bunnies being in a fight and Molly being supportive and being with Buddy while he apologizes to Shiner. So I think that's one of the beautiful lessons in there. You had mentioned earlier missing somebody that wasn't here, or the concept of death, and our book doesn't outright say that, but it says Buddy was sad because he was missing a friend who isn't here anymore. So that doesn't mean they died. It could mean that they moved. But so we build that vagueness in on purpose, so parents can then adapt that story to be more relevant to the child.
Yeah. And a lot of adults deal with the issue of abandonment and from childhood, and they don't even realize it. So that's excellent that that's in there to teach children of a situation where someone is gone, because a lot of people do deal with abandonment. That's one of the things that they don't know, that is actually a trauma. You know, they may have been mourning or grieving from a family member. Dad may have disappeared, mom may have disappeared, you know, grandmother, grandfather may have went out of their life or maybe died. And so they continually have issues with that, because again, no one has processed it with them.
And it could even be emotional abandonment.
Yeah,
that's right. You don't have that support anymore. Yep. So, and it's a pretty big deal. You know, a lot of people, because they can't have relationships because of it. Yeah.
So one of the pieces of our program also, this is the Spanish version, but it's a family guide. And I wanted to show you the format of this is basically, here is some adult education on really on what this lesson is, being brave. So it's adult level education about being brave. And then on the other side here are some starter questions, and you can start with those, but then make up your own too, based on how the conversation goes between you and your child. But you could also have that same conversation between you and your person, your best friend. You know, it's these are just ways to have more meaningful conversations rather than always talking about, I don't know, the Kardashians. No offense to the Kardashian lovers, but
yeah. Well, get it, you know, because I work with children, and you know, you always ask them, like, how much screen time the child gets, and they like, what? You know, they got a tablet, they're on it all day. No, they're only supposed to get 20 minutes, and then everything else, because there's some logic, right? You want them to learn how to use their brain, their cognitive, and sitting there watching different videos all day is not going to get it. That's really handicapping them. So
you want to be careful what they're learning through modeling. You know, if they're watching some of those reality TV shows where everybody's screaming at each other, they might think that's an okay behavior.
Right.
Kids are pretty observant. They learn.
And video games that are extremely violent and using guns to do whatever they do in video games. Right. And so that, I think that has I'm not saying outlaw all video games, but I just believe there's a deeper influence than anybody respects that the children's receive from observing, and especially if it's something they watch often or play often, it becomes a norm to them.
You don't get some counterbalance from somebody else, and that's all they're going to know.
Yeah.
That's all you taught them, is like, I eat everything with a fork because that's all I ever knew, right? I don't use a spoon for anything. I'm using a fork for everything because that's all I ever learned.
Yeah. And I just thought about something. You said that oh goodness, now my brain. I'm trying to do two things at one time. It doesn't work out that well anymore. But I like that you said that because they do, parents really don't know it. They don't know it. It seems like parents would, like you said, it's pretty fundamental, but they don't know that this is what the question I was. When is the brain fully developed?
Oh, well, a lot of it is actually developed before the age 5. So is that a stat that you're familiar with already?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
That's the formation of who that individual is. But the brain is not all the way developed to what age?
Boys not till they're like 25.
Oh, in that regard, yeah.
Right. What I'm trying to get at is that basically, you may be expecting some things like, like he said, out of a child that is really only right there in that minute, right? Don't have any, they're not thinking anything else. And then especially if, like he said, and like you said, Beth, if the only thing they're doing is watching television all day or watching a video, that's really all they have in that brain that's not developed. You
and
see what
even
I'm
when they're watching those TikTok things, whether it's the ice challenge that really didn't hurt anyone or several of the other ones, they want to be like those other people, right? And they want to be a part of it and they want to belong and they want to post their own video about it. But it gets really unhealthy when they try to eat a Tide Pod or whatever the latest thing is, And so if they're just continuing to get that influence, they're getting the dopamine hit when everybody comes and likes their video because they're like somebody else, And so then they'll just continue to do that again and again. And if you don't know that that's going on, I mean, you can't do anything to intervene.
I think they're learning to be sensational. Like you have to be very sensational now to get any attention, which is lots of screaming and your hands are up in the air. You're having to do something really odd. I'm not sure what word I'm looking for, but sensational. You have to be really dramatic and sensational.
Dramatic.
Catch anybody's attention these days.
Yeah.
And even, for me, that's too much energy too. That's a lot of energy. Now, I wanted to know, like, if a person, do you sell your program to individuals or is it sold to like groups, or how does that work?
We do both. And so New Groove, NEUGROOVE is our website, and newgroove.com, and I think it's in the chat. We sell the books, we sell the family guides. We also have an upcoming webinar series starting again next quarter where we talk to parents about this kind of thing. And so we also go to schools. So we have a curricula. So we have the different pieces and parts for different types of audiences to be able to really have a community. If some small community wanted to, they could implement this from school, from church, from home, and everybody starts to share the same language around emotions, and then you can understand them better. Half of the understanding somebody else is knowing the meaning of what they're meaning with a word, whatever that word happens to be. And so if there's not shared meaning, and I'm saying the word health and you're hearing the word health, but we actually assign that different meaning, we're not actually having a conversation about the same thing.
It's like speaking two different languages.
Yeah.
Somebody comes up to me and starts speaking French, I just go,
So we try to give an emotional language out there that people can embrace and keep it simple. That's why it's really created for children, and hopefully that the parents are actually going to learn at the same time. We're also finding teachers that are learning at the same time and giving us great feedback about their own personal experiences, teaching the children these concepts.
Yeah. Now, have you seen that emotional wheel?
Oh, yeah.
I used to use that in my groups because what I found with adults, especially those who have been through a traumatic experience, We only had 3 emotions. And that was, they might have been angry, sad, and then they would say okay. They wouldn't even be happy. It's just that I'm okay. And you're like, well, it's got to be other emotion. Can you identify the emotion? Well, I'm okay today.
Yeah.
And then, the other 2, my probation officer pissed me off, or the judge, so I'm angry. And I'm like, so you only got 3 emotions, and you're 30 years old. So I'm just saying that to say so many people are deficient as far as even recognizing their emotions and
Right.
the way they feel about things. And they really don't even know they feel a certain way. Because they only identify with those 3 different ones, and they're like, where's it, all the other ones?
Sometimes different emotions can feel the same in the body, which is one of the things we're teaching the kids of what emotion are you experiencing? Well, how does that feel in your body? Because there are tears of joy and there are tears of sadness. And so,
Right.
but you've got tears from both of them.
Right. And just like when we came on, you said, I got some anxiety, I'm a little warm. But you can be warm. When I teach anger management, okay, well, how do you feel when you begin to get angry? When you first know that that's a possibility, what happens? Oh, my hands get sweaty. My head gets hot.
Mm-hmm.
So you know that you're about to go all the way to 10 at that point, right? Yeah, I guess so. So yeah, I'm recognizing that you do got some physical to go with those emotions, but we all have emotions is the most important thing about it, right? And emotions are very important, and it's very healthy to identify them. Now, before we leave, guys, is there anything else you want to leave with our audience before we get ready to go?
I guess just what we're trying to do is kind of celebrate. There's a microculture around people who like to do preventative or proactive activities in order to avert situations. And so there's a lot of tools and organizations and things like that for a crisis when it happens. But what are you doing way in advance of the crisis? And that is actually why we start with the young children as young as 3, if the parent is interested to do this with them, because we really want children between the age of 3 and 7, maybe 8, to learn before adolescence hits, because adolescence brings in, especially for the girls, so many more emotions, and probably for the boys too. It's just not my personal experience.
Oh, yeah.
So I think the idea of how can I help prevent some things from happening later, some things you just can't prevent, and that is life. But there are ways you can start talking to your child, have them feel more connected to you, have them feel belonging in the family. You can ask them, are you feeling lonely? I think one of the big concerns is loneliness is something that contributes to withdrawing and then not being connected. And then also it can turn into extreme behaviors either toward themselves or others. And so not that we can say we can prevent any of that, but let's plant the right seeds as early as possible so that we have that dialogue, that trusted connection, so that that child doesn't grow up thinking, I have to keep this all inside, Yes. And so I think just knowing the proactivity and what you can do now, even if you're not seeing a problem, it's like brushing your teeth or flossing your teeth. You don't go to the dentist every day. You don't go to the expert every day, but you take care of yourself in between the visits. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I like that. And I think that's true. I in my mind, I was thinking, I always used to tell my drug court group, I said, well, you know what? Either we work it out here, or you'll go back to court. You'll be back in court because it has gotten out of control, and all it was your emotions. That's all. And we can talk about it, and possibly get it taken care of here, the way you get some tools to work, to continue to work on it, rather than let it get out of control, because that's what happens. A lot of people end up in jail or, dead because they just don't know how to handle their emotions. They just have
outbursts. Yeah.
Yeah, they just don't know how to handle it. So I really appreciate you guys. Our time went back by really fast tonight.
Did.
I appreciate the audience. I seen Jason was on with us. I know Miss Keisha's always supportive. So I appreciate all the audience, everybody that logs in. And I'm hoping that you got some good information from Keith and Beth. It was really, really good information, to be honest, because we're still going through some tough times here. And we're going to have to be looking out for each other and our emotions, right? So, we appreciate everybody tonight, and good night, and thank you all again. Good show.
Thanks for having us.
Thank